Sir, welcome.
As always, it is the best part of my week to be here. I hope you guys are having an excellent day as well.
So far, so good. Neal, I want to start with Sean McVay. I've always found him to be obviously a really good coach. He's won a Super Bowl. But I've always found it interesting the way either he challenges or uses timeouts during the course of a game. And I felt like in this game, in the end, it came back to burn him. What was your thought?
As far as it pertains to McVay, I would say I think he's pretty much a perfectionist. He's kind of a control freak, and obviously a lot of coaches are going to be like that. And to my knowledge, I'm thinking here, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe he used the second half timeouts on offense.
Yeah.
And to me, that kind of suggests he needs to have everything the way that he wants it to be, the way that it needs to be. It's not so much strategic; it's more coordination. Something's not right about what they're looking at. And in that case, unfortunately for the Rams, it kind of came down to that, ironically, that the challenge rules prevented the right call from being made. More rules you have, the more they're going to overlap. And I think he certainly would have liked to have had another challenge back, but at the same time, let's open ourselves up to the possibility that, they weren't going to score a touchdown on the next play to tie the game. There was still a lot of work for them to have done if the spot was put where it certainly seemed like it should have been. The game wasn't over. His team got beat pretty handily in the fourth quarter, and it's not at all the impression that you would have got watching the first three quarters of that game. If anything, my thought was, I think I tweeted this as well, whatever the Steelers are doing through the first three quarters of the game, you need to put them away, because if you're letting them hang around, they're going to come back, and something's going to happen. They're going to do things. You're going to have special teams mistakes, and all of a sudden, boom, they're in the lead, and you've got one of the best pass rushers in the last 20 years in the NFL coming after your quarterback when you're behind. It didn't come to that. It almost did, but Kenny Pickett, once again, is playing above and beyond what we see from him for most of the game. In the time that, as the game goes on, you really need him to. And he did. The Rams didn't close the door. They, I hate to use that cliche, but you got to put this team away. You can beat them three quarters and they'll beat you in one and win the game. And that's really what we saw Sunday. And I think McVay certainly has, legitimate beef with how the final sequence of decisive plays went down. Whether he saved a timeout or not, they surrendered a tremendous advantage in this game. And once again, we talk about it every week. It's a game that the Steelers just really shouldn't have won and somehow pulled it off.
I want to talk about Watt for a moment. In watching the 49ers the last two games, I watched a decent amount of their game with Cleveland, and I watched a decent amount of their game last night with the Vikings. And look, they want to rush four. That's the whole thing. It looks like 8 to 9 times out of 10 they want to rush four and drop, which puts a lot of pressure on Bosa to make a play. He hasn't made plays the last 2 weeks. Why is it that Watt makes plays every week, regardless of what they're trying to do to him?
Oh, I hate the answer that comes to my mind, because I don't want to disparage Nick Bosa. I think he's a phenomenal player.
Sure.
Seeing Watt and Bosa, and you throw in Garrett to that as well, you're looking at Hall of Fame level players at their prime.
Yep.
And they're pushing each other to do more. I was at the game last night, the Vikings and 49ers, and I said to the people that I was with, we haven't heard Bosa's name much. He's got to do something at some point here. When I watch Micah Parsons, that happens. When I watch Myles Garrett, that happens. T.J. Watt does it naturally. He is at the moment. He's above the moment in comparison to his opponents. Bosa didn't the last 2 weeks. And you're right. They needed him to. 49ers needed one defensive stop to get back in that game. And Bosa didn't deliver it. Watt, on the other hand, is covering slot receivers, making moves on passes like defensive backs. in which a veteran quarterback who couldn't possibly have experienced more football than Matthew Stafford has didn't even see him. Didn't think that was going to happen at all. It was the easiest completion of the day. If you look at his body language, the way that he read that play, he had no idea T.J. Watt was sizing it up the entire time. At this point, side to side, not to take anything away from Bosa last season, absolutely deserved to be Defensive Player of the Year, in my opinion.
Right.
But over the course of their careers to date, Bosa's on the shorter end of the stick, partially due to injury, but he doesn't do it at such a high level every single game the way Watt does. And we get into, I think if anything, people are, they get stuck in describing Watt in terms of today against his true contemporaries, Myles Garrett probably being the primary one. We don't look at the bigger picture with him, the sense of history, and recognize the fact, he's 7 years into a career, but it really doesn't feel like that.
Right.
And he's been playing at such a high level now for so long, it makes you wonder where he's going to finish. Where is he going to end up in his career? Pass rushers tend to not be every down dominant players over time. It's a very athletic position. It takes a toll on you physically. There's a lot that you have to do. And they ask Watt to do a ton. You have to wonder how long he's going to last, but then he goes out and has games like he had against the Rams. He single-handedly wins this team's games over the last couple of years. It's remarkable to see him still playing at the level that he's at.
Right.
And Bosa, as incredible of a player he is, he doesn't touch Watt at this point. Just there are so few football players beyond a quarterback that can take over the game. And right now, in my opinion, T.J. Watt has shown the most ability to do that over the longest amount of time among defensive players not named Aaron Donald.
Right.
Donald's the king. Going to keep him off to the side. He's also played a lot more than the ones we've talked about have. But Watt, the level of superiority in terms of clutch plays and how much higher he is than his opponents, it's remarkable. I don't know how many people in history we've really seen elevate his game the way he does on the defensive side of the ball in big moments the way he has.
And I know how highly you think of D'Amico Ryans. Since you were at the game Monday night at the Viking ship, great building. Am I right about that? It felt like they kept showing 6, and then they'd just drop Warner and Greenlaw, they'd rush 4. I felt like they did that all night, and it kind of gave Cousins time to do what he wanted to do.
It was interesting to me because what you saw a lot of with Cousins is that the second play of the game, it seemed like he checked out of something and into a bootleg, which oddly enough, Kirk Cousins is not exactly fleet of foot, but he's a very effective quarterback off of play action and outside of the pocket. You don't want to send him out there unless you have to, but on design stuff, he does pretty well with it. And the Vikings kept that action in the whole game. He was almost taking an extra step before handoffs. That was his play action. He showed almost like he's looking to give and then get out of the pocket. They had a plan to do that. I think some of that was to try to slow down the linebackers from those A and B gap blitzes. And you're looking at the combination of Greenlaw and Fred Warner. I mean, that's about as hard to plan for on multiple levels for any offense you're going to get in the game. And it's a big part of the reason why San Francisco has had the success that it's had, not over the last 2 games, but an excellent defensive team overall in terms of scheme, in terms of personnel. They do things really well, and you almost have to create stuff like that. I don't want to call it misdirection. It's almost more sleight of hand, and commit to it, because now you have to have a largely immobile quarterback showing boot action on every single play just for the sake of trying to get those guys out of out of A gap, out of the middle, and slow them down a little bit so you can be a little bit more effective. And they had some success with that up until the point where they tried the tush push twice, which was embarrassingly bad. Mm-hmm. But when Kirk was in a rhythm, you saw that Warner and Greenlaw, it's not that they were neutralized so much, but they had to have that thought in their head. And I think you'll see teams doing that against them more and more, and they'll figure out a counter to it. Maybe they just say, fine, if you want to act like Kirk Cousins is going to bootleg on every play, go ahead. We'll come after you. But they struggled up front. The Vikings offensive line did a remarkable job against a very good defensive front seven. I don't think that's a typical result that we'll see the rest of the year, but hats off to them schematically, and the Vikings won that game.
I'm going to stick with this game for a moment because you were there. Brock Purdy, he got pressure. He got pressure against Cleveland, and Myles Garrett will do that. But he got pressure last night as well. How well is he seeing the field, in your opinion, as somebody who was there?
I felt that's one of the better games I've probably seen Cousins play. I felt
I'm talking about Purdy.
Or Purdy, sorry. In many ways, Purdy, here's the thing with him, and this is what's so much fun to watch with him. He has excellent anticipation. Mm-hmm. He's a very decisive quarterback. He made a couple throws that were like, wow, they're really impressive. There was a long drag from Kittle that I recall, probably the 15, 18-yard mark. He gets the ball. He kind of hop steps back. When his back foot hits, he's delivering it somewhere. Yeah. And he's not targeting any one particular receiver. He moved the ball around pretty good. They blanketed Kittle for the most part, and he's a good player. They tried to go to other options. I thought A looked really good, but it looked like maybe there was a miscommunication or two. One of the two interceptions was pretty bad. I'm sure he wants both throws back, but one of them seemed to be more the receiver stopped as opposed to running through the route. He's pushing late in the game. You can kind of get a sense of where that comes from, but he definitely 5,000 times better than he was against Cleveland. Cleveland game, he was bad. I thought he played pretty well. Not his best game, but you're on the road, a Monday night game. It was loud, pretty raucous crowd. You have to think he's, in many ways too, playing at Iowa State. He's got a lot of fans in that stadium. He did. There were a bunch of people wearing Iowa State jerseys. I felt he could have probably played a little bit better, but he set the bar so high for himself already, to the point where you're hearing the pundits on the morning shows talking about, see, I told you he wasn't elite. You mean the guy with 14 career starts who was the last pick in the draft in his second year is not an elite quarterback? Yeah. We have to argue this? This is something to debate? It goes to show, though, it's not so much about where he was when he started. It's about how he's developing. And if you are looking at him as a development project, which you still need to look at him as, because he's really young, I thought he did an excellent job. There are some issues, I think, with the team overall. The lack of Trent Williams, the lack of Deebo Samuel, that's going to take any offense down. Those are two all-pro level players. Sure. It's hard to execute without that when you're used to having that, when you have to game plan around it. And they came pretty close. I thought they did a good job considering the environment that they were in. He could have been a little bit better, but you have to be very encouraged by the fact that that's the kind of conversation that you're having. There are a lot of teams with other quarterbacks that have played longer than Purdy has, that have the full strength of their offense behind them, that did not do the things that he did last night. So San Francisco is such an interesting team to watch, and they're so talented and they're so well coached. The expectations on the former Mr. Irrelevant are just, it's mind-blowing how far he's come from where he was, and it really makes you think, what is his ceiling? Can he continue to grow? And I think he can, largely because he just has great anticipatory skills, and he makes decisions, and he goes with it. He doesn't hesitate. He delivers catchable balls. Again, he missed on a few. I don't think he was perfect by any stretch, but I thought he played pretty well overall within his game. He doesn't need to be Justin Herbert, hitting 30-yard outs on a dime. He can go to who's there and what's there, and be happy with it. Some might call that a system quarterback. I call it a smart quarterback, because he's largely effective in doing it. He hit receivers that could run after catch, they could make plays, and they had some success. Not as much as you would probably expect, but a lot of different reasons for that are beyond just him.
I'll transition back to the Steelers because here's the schedule. The next 3 games are all at Acrisure Stadium. They got Jacksonville, then they have the Thursday night game with Tennessee, then Green Bay. Now, you and I both know we don't know what to expect every week from the Steelers outside of T.J. Watt, but how favorable is this potential run for them here?
Oh, God, it's harder and harder every week. I don't know. It's the hardest team in the NFL to bet on.
Yeah, no doubt.
I would think that they'd be field goal favorites. I haven't seen it yet. I'd imagine they'd be field goal favorites over Jacksonville, but that's a tough matchup for them. Jacksonville's a very aggressive front defensive team. Mm-hmm. The offensive line that played really well, I thought, last week against the Rams, when they got things probably a little better figured out than they have right away. And they played an excellent game. Yes. Can they do that again? Maybe that's the biggest question. Can the Steelers do it again? That's the question we ask every week. Are they going to get suffocated offensively, or are they going to come out and have a pretty strong performance? One of those two things happened the previous week, and you don't know whether or not it's going to happen again. That said, I think we know pretty well who they are, and their magic ability is to drag teams down to the level that they're at and play the game in the muck, get a team out of rhythm, get a team off balance offensively. I think they did a great job of that against the Rams, largely bottling up Cooper Kupp. Granted, they gave up a bunch to somebody else, but it's not as if the Rams were hugely productive for the whole game. It was kind of a bend but don't break situation. They gave up a lot of big plays but didn't give up points. That says great and terrible things about a defense at the same time, and that's just kind of who they are. That said, if they're going to make hay this year, it's going to have to be in this 3-game stretch. It's critical that they stack wins, given the limitations that they have. But the encouraging thing here to really look at is you got Deontay Johnson back, and you saw the difference with Johnson on the field offensively. A much more fluid passing concept existing on a play-to-play basis. They didn't have that before. It really just kind of looked like backyard football, Kenny dropping back and throwing to whatever he sees after 4 seconds. With Johnson there, you had a reliable target.
Right.
Unfortunately, you lost Freiermuth in exchange for Johnson, though, so another step back in that way. But you get Hayward back here pretty quick on defense. You can fix some of the holes that you have as far as your run defense goes. It's only going to help your pass rush. They're going to be better. And the fact that they're 4-2, you got two choices how you want to view them moving ahead over into the quarter of the season mark that we're at. You can look at how they won 4 games, which I don't know if they can do again, or you can just simply say they have not hit their highest end yet. I think that's as fair a statement as you can make about the Steelers. They can play a lot better because they're still averaging 17 points a game. Right. They can get a lot better. And you tend to kind of think, and maybe this is just coming off of a thrilling win, you kind of think that they're closer to kind of putting this whole thing together. What do they need to do that? I think they need more explosion. I think they need better pass protection. We're seeing that. Johnson back on the field is going to do that. Credit to Dan Moore. Probably, I don't know how many instances there have been among Steelers games in the last 10 years in which the fan base actively rooted against one guy starting, but that was him, and he played a great game. He did a great job. They got back-to-back excellent performances from their starting left tackle. That hasn't happened in a long time. I know that. Their interior line played a lot better than they have, certainly late in the game. They put a lot of positive things together in a tough road win that they can build on, leading into a very sneaky, competitive AFC rival. This is a big game for them, and beyond that, you know, they 2 or 3. You have to think that there's a legitimate chance that they could steal the division off of who I feel are 2 better teams in Cincinnati and Baltimore. This is just what they do. You know, you got to kill them before the fourth quarter. I like to think that that's going to apply to the season as well. You better get a lead on them because they're going to come back on you.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Great work as always.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yes.
Well, I was having a great fall until Saturday, but I mean, you know, the reality is the sun came up, so it's onward and upward.
All right, you've been in this position before, and on a day where you end up going 1 for 16 on third down, which in the end that's the part that just crushes you offensively. You can't sustain anything. You know, what as you're standing there trying to come up with, quote, something, because you know what's happening, how difficult is that as you're trying to go through a game and say, okay, we got to find something that works to keep drives going? What's that like, because you've lived it?
Well, I think everybody's focused on the 1 for 16 on the third downs, really. And the number beside that number is really the 1 of 8 on third and fourth downs and 4 or less. That's where they really didn't make any hay.
Right, and that's why I talked about that.
That's your swing. Yeah, that's your swing right there, because, you know, third one was 3rd and 30. I mean, God doesn't make that. Right. But at the end of the day, those are the things. And so you're trying to, and they tried different things. I think, you know, they threw the ball out to Singleton on the 3rd and 1. It was a little behind them. They tried throwing, tried running it. So I just think that Ohio State's really good defensively. You know, I mean, some of the things Ohio State's tried to do in their short yardage, they used Devin Brown coming into that game who got hurt. There may be, you know, as you go ahead, there may be a role for a guy like Pavula to do that kind of stuff if they're still having those kind of troubles. But it's difficult. But dang, you're still in that game. And that game came out pretty much how most people thought it was going to be, come down to a mistake or a turnover, and Penn State just didn't capitalize on the turnover when they had the shot.
It's difficult because, see, I'm trying to think, you know, somebody one time told me, well, he probably told me 30 times. He said something to me about, Steve, it comes down to 4 or 5 key plays every game, and it could be play 1, it could be play 78. I think you may know with that individual I'm referencing.
I heard that. Believe me, I heard that a few times too.
Yeah, okay. I've felt the Ohio State games over the last few years, for the most part, have come down to a key player sequence in the first half and a key player sequence in the second half, and Ohio State, for the most part, has won those. In the first half, the sequence was the Jacobs play, and then they keep the ball, get a touchdown. The other one was after the punt went off the foot of Fleming and Elsdon recovered, and Penn State could not convert and then went for it on 4th down, and Ohio State eventually scored. Is that too simple on my part?
No, I think that's the main thing. I think if you look at when the ball went off Fleming's foot, I'm watching the game going, okay, there's the Mark Rubin moment that we've all been waiting for.
That's what I told Jack. That's what I told Jack. Exactly what I told Jack, the Mark Rubin moment.
The kid that didn't come to Penn State, he's at Ohio State. I'm going, oh my God, it's poetic justice, and we, you know, obviously didn't get the score on it. And I think one of the things, you know, there's been a lot of people critical of the offensive court, Mike Yursich. There's been a lot of people critical of how Al played, but the reality is this. You know, you're in an offense that's a little different than what Penn State's been because you don't have that mobile quarterback, and that the minute you don't have the mobile quarterback, that opens up all the coverage playbook to you as a coordinator on defense. So it makes it more difficult in those third downs because they can do more stuff. And Ohio State's a really, really good defensive football team.
Yes.
They tackle really, really well. I mean, they hadn't given up a pass play of 36 yards or longer than 36 yards all year. Have not given up a run of 22 yards or more than 22 yards all year. They're not great offensively, but they're going to be a handful whoever plays them, you know, on defense.
1995 game at Michigan State. Last play of the game, Wally gets the ball to Bobby Ingram because Joe said plain out, I want the ball in Bobby Ingram's hands because he's the best player in the field. You knew going into the game Marvin Harrison was the best player in the field. In fact, when they played Georgia, he was the best player in the field. Not Jalen Carter, not Nolan Smith. It was Marvin Harrison. How difficult is it I know he's a wide receiver, but how difficult is it all day long to deal with a guy like that who is the best player in the field?
Well, what people realize is he's so big and physical, so it's tough. I mean, King interfered with him on a couple of plays, and he still caught the dang ball. And,
Yeah.
You can't do much more than that. You're breaking the rules to come. But what I think people realize is for most of that game, Penn State kept Ohio State on a long field. They kept him in check. He didn't get the big over-the-top fade route on him for the touchdown. I mean, they really did a good job against him. The one breakout play was the crossing route late in the game, and Ohio State finally came to that adjustment. But, was he the difference in the game? I wouldn't necessarily say that as it relates to that. Stover made a couple of big plays. They ran the ball fairly well when they had to. But at the end of the day, the mistakes, the 4th down and 3 was kind of the pivotal point in the game when Penn State didn't make it. Because other than that, it's a one-score game, and Penn State did what they had to do out there to have a chance to win in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job. For the most part, they played zone, and they ran the 2 wides deep against the zone, and that opened it up underneath. That's how I saw it? Is that how you saw it?
Yeah, and they got in his face and held him up sometimes, and
yeah,
and they did a nice job. And look, at the end of the day, up until the 4th down, when you look at Ohio State's average starting field position was their own 22-yard line.
That's right.
They did a great job. I mean, that was a well-coached football game, and you take your shot on the 4th and 3 because you feel like this is your shot, and it didn't work out for you. So everybody wants to be critical of coaching and the 3rd down. They never put the defense in a bad position. The defense had a field to defend almost the entire game. I thought coming away from that thing, you got a young quarterback on the road, and you had a chance to win the game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, you go through 3.5 hours of that, and it's interesting because Penn State came into the game averaging 6.3 yards per play on first down. Because we talk about the 1 of 16 on 3rd down. It's what you do on 1st and 2nd down that sets up what your deal is on 3rd down. Well, they averaged 6.1 on 1st down in this game. But when you're 0 of 6 on 3rd and less than 4, and you're 1 of 3 on 4th down, all right, and I think 2 of the 4th downs were less than 4. That sound right? I mean,
yep.
that not finding a conversion there somewhere is tough, and that's a credit to Ohio State's defense, but that's hard to do sometimes, and you can't sustain any momentum when that's happening, right?
No, and part of it is getting in a rhythm.
Yeah.
Because when you get into a rhythm, then you get confident. I think there was a little bit of, and look, there's some young people in key spots on the offense, including quarterback, to where when you have, this is the first time he's really had that kind of adversity, and he'll learn from it, and Drew will learn from it. The team will learn from it. Without a guy like Langdon up front at guard, that's a big loss. I mean, they're missing some key people in terms of leadership and that kind of thing. So I think, when you get into that, it's hard. You need somebody to kind of take charge. And I don't know if they have that personality on that offense. When you watch Michigan with J.J. McCarthy, that kid, he's been around. There's only 3 or 4 teams in the country, a quarterback that started more than 15 games in a top 10, 20 defense. Right. So Penn State's got the top 20 defense. They just don't have a very experienced quarterback yet. But you know what? There's so many things ahead of him right now. And look, there's so many things ahead of this team.
Yes.
Now, I know immediately everybody's like, well, Michigan. I said, dude, play Indiana first. And then Maryland is not a given.
That's right.
People are looking at Michigan already. And then after Michigan, Rutgers is playing pretty good football right now, too. So
6-2.
Yeah, just take it one at a time, folks. Honestly, the sun came up this morning. The leaves are beautiful. Let's look forward to the Indiana game.
As a coaching staff, every coaching staff handles it, in their own way. After something like this, what was the way that the staffs you were on handled the first couple of days of the next week to do what you could to get the team back on track?
Well, I'll give you 2 different examples. One was good, one was bad. In '99, we lost to Minnesota in a game we never should have lost. It was crushing. and that team moped around. And it was tough to get them off it. And then we went out and played Michigan, had them down 10 points, and they drove twice. Some quarterback named Brady drove 2 long drives to beat us.
Yep.
And, that team really went in the tank after that Minnesota loss. Just never really got their footing back under them. And I go to 2005, where we just had a brutal loss out of Michigan, where a couple things that shouldn't have happened. And that team made up their mind that we're going to win the rest of our games. Same thing in 2008 when we lost to Iowa. That team just said, we're going to win the rest of our games, win the Big Ten. So that can happen for this team, but it has to start with Indiana. And, I feel like I would be a good guy for the, mental health hotline for Penn State fans right now. I may have to open up a hotline and say, call me and I'll try and talk you through this.
Well, that's because there's a couple things. So let's just turn our attention now. It's got to be Indiana next. No matter what you do, you've got to come out. You've got to win this game this week. I know there's no getting around it. In 17, 19, and 22, Penn State hit November, and there was nobody left on the schedule that gave them a signature win. They won, but there was nobody that vaulted them. They still have opportunities based on what they have here that's still in front of them that actually can do that, Jay.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, you go out and you beat Michigan, and then if you go out and win the next 2, I'm getting ahead of myself already.
You can't do that.
If Penn State would have run the table, and Michigan beats Ohio State, which I think that if I had to make a guess as to right now, I think Michigan's the best team in this conference. Maybe, but just in terms of the whole package.
Sure.
Penn State beats them, and if Penn State wins out and Michigan beats Ohio State, now you get a 3-way tie with 1 loss each. Based on all 3 of them, who goes to the Big Ten championship game? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure.
Right.
But it's probably Ohio State based on the Notre Dame win, the Penn State win. I don't know, because Michigan hasn't beaten anybody yet.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you're sitting there at 11-1. And whether you make the Big Ten championship or not, the playoff committee's got a decision to make about a lot of. There's going to be a lot of. I think there'll be a lot of one-loss teams laying around, and who knows? But if you don't take care of Indiana, and the story, and this is a game that, quite frankly, I think that Penn State comes out and they're focused. I think it would be great to go out and try and get a fast start for Allard, to give him a little confidence and get down the field. And this is a defense that's quite. Indiana's defense is not real good. I mean, they're the best part of their. That's the best part of their team right now.
Right.
But to go out and get the running game going, get some play action game, get them confident and go and get out and jump on them early, I think then that resets his team for the rest of the way.
One final question before I let you go, and that's on Drew Aller. You do your show every week with Tom Bradley, so you look at a lot of video during the week. You've now looked at 7 games of Drew Aller as a starting quarterback, getting a lot of reps in. Where is he better now than you think he was the first 2 or 3 games of the season?
Well, I think the one thing is he's playing better competition. So maybe his numbers have not been better, but he's playing better football teams. I think he's incredible. He does a great job of moving around the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield. He does a really good job of protecting the football and not putting his defense in a bad position. And the one thing I worry about him right now is he might be a little too tentative in that regard. I think right now the next thing for him is going to be to anticipate some things and let the ball rip downfield. I think that's the one area where you look at it. And we did a couple weeks ago. We broke down the 3 Big Ten games during the bye week as where the ball had gone. Not a lot of balls downfield, but at the same token, hadn't turned the ball over, and they've done a great job capitalizing on turnovers, which is one of the surprises about Saturday with the fumble. I mean, they've just done a great job with that stuff. But I think the game is slowing down for him a little bit, it looks like. But that the one thing with him is they're going to have to protect him, and they're going to have to get some running game going to help him out.
Jay, always a pleasure, my friend. Appreciate it so much.
Well, always fun, Steve, and see you down the line soon.
Sounds great. Mark, great to see you on Saturday. Thanks so much for your time today.
Absolutely, Steve. It was good seeing you up there.
I'd said earlier, and I want to see what you think about this, and you can tell me I'm all wet. I've always felt like that in the last few years it's been either Ohio State making one key play each half or winning winning a sequence each half. And I felt on Saturday they won one sequence each half, and that was the fumble that wasn't a fumble, touchdown, and then after the fourth down, the drive that they did that essentially got them to 20. How did you view that?
Yeah, I could see that. A lot of them, in some ways, have been fourth quarters, and historically. So that's kind of maybe the frame of reference it would have. But those two instances, they did win those instances. But I also think they stretched some of their wins against Penn State in other ways too. You get a win when you back them up. A 3-and-out inside the 10-yard line, you get the muffed punt, and then you get another win there. Yep. I think defensively, to me, was a big stretch. And getting to, I thought maybe there was a psychological win too in getting Penn State into believing that the 4th and 4, going for it on 4th and 4, kind of midway through that fourth quarter, was a do or die time. And that in the sense that maybe they were just, I don't know, James Franklin, the way he explained it afterward, is he felt like he had to be aggressive because they didn't know if they were going to get the ball back. I don't know if that was a function of just, seeing Marvin Harrison catching another couple of passes on that series because they hadn't run, but maybe that was a psychological impact too, that got them, I think, maybe sped their heart rate in that situation and went for it instead of taking instead of punting. They're on fourth down. It's not like there were 4 minutes left. But yeah, I mean, those are the two sequences that you mentioned. That they were 2-0 in that situation. There's no doubt.
What was your thought watching the game play out in real time? What were some of the thoughts that ran through your mind in real time scenes?
Yeah. Defenses are every bit as good as we thought they would be. There was just not a lot of room to do much of anything outside, really, of Marvin Harrison, who was better than I even thought. I hadn't watched a lot of Ohio State, to be honest with you, this year, seeing clips. Clips are different than seeing him from a field level like that, and I think I forget what the target rate was. I mean,
he had 6
targets.
He had 35 pass attempts. 16 were targeted to Harrison. He made 11.
Right, and I think there were a couple of times too that you would just you'd see Marvin Harrison free, and he wasn't even targeted on those plays. That Kyle McCord went somewhere else, didn't see him, whatever. Marvin Harrison. And the play you talked about, the fumble, I mean, Marvin Harrison was instrumental in that one, too, in being helped on that play. He was, watching him from above is very different. And there were a couple of plays that I actually did just went, what's he doing that is so different than other receivers that I've seen? And his movements, the way he glide, cut in and out of routes, it just looked like he had Penn State, the secondary kind of just trying to hang on. That really, really stuck out to me. The other thing that stuck out to me, I thought Penn State secondary, I mean, you could say all that about Marvin Harrison, still did just a really good job, kind of, I thought, across the board with Johnny Dixon, Daquan Hardy. They made some plays. Zachy Wheatley and Jalen Reed on the goal line stand. Those guys, I think they put Penn State's offense in as good a position, in the best possible position to win that game, and they didn't get rewarded for it.
I also thought their special teams did the job except for the one punt that hit the ground. That Penn State special teams were very good on Saturday.
Yeah, and Daquan Hardy was asked about that after the game. It was a wind issue. It's kind of what you might have thought, but that in games like that those are going to really matter. But one of my players to watch going into this game was Alex Falcon. I mean, he had, hadn't kicked in Beaver Stadium, but hadn't come in and kicked really in a real, I think, this kind of road environment, but he's been really good on the road. And he had 240 yards. That's the other thing with me. I thought Riley Thompson was good enough in that game that I thought you could have used him in that situation, in punting in that situation, make that play. And Tyler Elson on the ball to get those things. That was very much a two-phase game, as much as coaches love to say complementary football.
Yeah.
They got the complementary football for the most part from two of their phases.
Because it's interesting about the two punters. You know what the two of them have in common? Besides the rugby style and so forth, neither one of them has a touchback this season on punt. Right? So you would feel good that you can get the ball with either punter inside the 10, 15-yard line because neither one of them has had a touchback this year.
Yeah, especially he would have been punting, inside of midfield kind of things. It was something that he could have definitely gotten at least inside, the 20. I think comfortably that you could have held that. And with 7.5 minutes to go, I would have taken my chance on the defense.
Yeah. And what did James say about that? Because it turned out, here's the irony of all ironies, the cord that attaches the headset stuff in the locker room for us, it ran under a door and somebody opened the door and it knocked the plug out. It's like, great. So we didn't
hear the post game.
We didn't get, Jack and I didn't get a chance to talk to him. And they didn't realize it until they actually went back and found it, and they found it laying on the floor. It's just stuff like that happens. So you don't get worried. It just happens. So when it was, what did he say about it when he was asked about it?
Yeah, he just said, you might not. At that point, he felt like you might not get the ball back. I think that was pretty much word for word. We may not get the ball back. We needed to be aggressive. And at that point, I don't remember what the exact third down number was in that situation. It was over 15 at one point, and on, I think their yardage. I remember looking on the section. Their yardage of third and short. They weren't getting any real substantial yardage at all, even on third and short kind of plays. They were not moving anywhere. They had incomplete passes on those third and short attempts. That was essentially, it was a fourth. This was a 3rd and 4. Now on 4th and 4. That was, I thought, that was a really, really tough moment to put that offense. That if they're feeling like this is desperate to go for it at this point. And they had been kind of straining already. I might have given them one more reset.
Yeah. Is it too early, because it's Game 7 and there's still more football to play, to now put Penn State into a box as to what they are and what they aren't? Or was this game enough to tell people what they are and what they aren't?
I think there's some of that. We knew defensively. They were as good defensively as we thought they were going to be. I think I had predicted them to win. I picked them to win, and I think my score was going to be something like 20-17. I thought, scoring 20 points would have been enough, and it almost really kind of was. Right. That late touchdown, I think, was just against a flailing defense. The thing I'm curious about offensively is where they were, is that identity that we'd heard a lot about, that they're comfortable being the time of possession offense. They're comfortable with a quarterback who can make checks and see the field and not take the chances. I don't know that I think we saw or we missed some of that. I don't remember seeing the T formation offense anywhere, especially in their short yardage. Right. I thought the trick plays, I didn't feel like that they were necessary. I felt they felt a little bit forced too. I understand that you're trying to take swings and do something different, do something that the opponent hasn't seen. But and again, those are all hindsight because they didn't work. If they work, they're great. But the one taking the ball out of Drew's hands, especially after the muffed punt, I felt like if you're going to take the swing there, take it with Drew. Take it with your best player, your quarterback throwing to your best player instead of having maybe your best offensive threat throwing the ball. That was where a little bit I think they got out of some of the identity that we had seen about being comfortable in your own skin. Seemed to me like they left that a little bit at the door and got desperate might be too strong a word, but they got antsy. It just felt like they got a little anxious in some situations.
Because it's interesting because Ohio State, whenever they brought Xavier Johnson in the game, I pointed out in the broadcast, I said, you watch the tapes, whenever they bring him in, the possibility is there of jet sweep as their trick play, and they did it 3 times.
Yeah,
and so it's not like
and they did, and they brought in Devin Brown too.
Yeah, and Penn State blew up all the plays. They brought up Devin Brown at the goal line. We knew, and we pointed out it's quarterback draw time. That's what they like to do with him. Penn State blew up all 5 plays. So both defenses were so well prepared, Mark. That's what gets me about it. Like, both defenses really had a handle on the other guy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No question. One guy just happened to have Marvin Harrison.
Yeah.
And I
pretty good guy.
He's phenomenal. I still think Nicholas Singleton could be.
Yes.
He could have been maybe that player in this game, especially when he kind of got loose in the beginning. And then he just, for whatever reason, it'd be interesting to see after the fact, maybe James Franklin will address it Tuesday, is where did Nicholas Singleton go? Because I think, it was, 42 yards?
Yes.
The first series, and 6 carries, 6 yards after that. I know games unfold in different ways, but I felt like, okay, Nick finally got Nick had his feet early, and for whatever reason, it just didn't, they got away from it.
Yeah. Okay, so one final question, and I appreciate the time today. It is about this. There's been points in seasons, especially, I remember pointing this out in 17 and in 19, where Penn State's having really good years. And I said they would get to November, but there was no signature game left that could vault them. Penn State still has that. So is that what we have to wait and see? Is A, how do they react this week, and then the 3:30 game with Maryland the week after? And then, obviously, the game with Michigan. Is that when we really have like the full evaluation about this thing? Because they still have that chance to vault.
Yeah, no question. You can even bring up last year, too, not having the signature.
That's right.
After Michigan, too, as well. I mean, you've got to come back. You fractured yourself. You come back and you win 5 games really strongly. Even before you get to Michigan, I'm just really curious about Maryland.
Yes.
Because they've just had Maryland's number, especially out down there. But, in this last couple of games, I'm going to discount 2020.
Right.
They've had Maryland's number for several years. And Maryland almost had that, was it the 19 game we went down there and it was at night, and then Maryland's going to have 59-0, I think it was.
Yes. It was a blackout game. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder where Maryland is going to be on that timeline as well. The 2 teams, Penn State might still be just a little calloused and sore from Ohio State, and then keep thinking about the concept, the exterior concept that quite frankly we build up, maybe to the detriment, but we build up the season into a 2-game season essentially, right? So if you're at Maryland going, well, we just got to get through this thing, and then we have our chance at home next week.
Right.
How do you really respond in that moment? It'd be interesting to see if they go just put together 2 really good games. That's what that 16 team did. They started after Minnesota, put in some, 2 really good games and got themselves to Ohio State. So to me, I think there's 2 really important dates left. I think Maryland is a real test.
No, I agree with you. It is a really important game.
Mm-hmm.
No question. Mark, it is always a pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time, for the analysis, and as always, thoughtful.
Anytime. Thanks so much.